If you've been watching this show for a while, you'll know that trying to draw fast, smooth and realistic 3D visuals has never been an easy task for PCs. When personal computers first appeared, all they could do was text, text and more text. Today, dedicated 3D graphics cards which help solve that problem are beginning to appear, but we thought we'd give you an update on the system we think might beat the rest, Power VR. Up until now, drawing three-dimensional scenes has normally been done one particular way. Make polygon wire meshes for each object, paint them with the right colour, and then work out which bits you're supposed to be able to see with something called a Z buffer.
Most traditional systems use a polygonal model and use a Z buffer, which is a large memory system. Now, those two things together mean that the system is very expensive. We don't use any of those technologies at all.
Instead, Power VR uses its own secret rendering code along with a way of describing shapes called infinite plane geometry. It's complicated, but the results are visuals that include correct shadows, atmospheric fog, and multiple light sources. Most PC graphic cards are actually slower than the computer's brain or CPU, making the computer wait around doing nothing. Here, it's the other way around.
Power VR has the ability to render 3D images faster than the CPU can deliver the geometry necessary. So in fact, it's quite dependent on the speed of the CPU that's inside the machine.
So it's still a case of the faster your machine, the better it'll go. But with claims of 3 to 4 times the rendering speed of a PlayStation and Saturn, even the Nintendo 64's got some serious competition. Right now, some of you will be saying, yeah, very pretty, but is anyone going to use it? Well, big software names like Namco and Sega have already signed agreements to convert their best titles to take advantage of Power VR's features. But the biggest news is that the world's largest PC maker, Compaq, has decided to put the 3D system into several of its models as standard.
We had our engineers go through and literally look at every single company that was working on 3D technology, and Power VR was clearly the fastest. And the interesting thing was not only was it the fastest, but it was also extremely cost-effective.
After VideoLogic explained their design to us, we couldn't believe that someone hadn't thought of the idea sooner, but it's often the most simple concepts that are the toughest to come up with. So far, Power VR has a whole lot of promise and a whole bunch of people behind the scenes trying to make it a standard. Once the technical demos are replaced by games from the top software houses, the future could be very bright indeed. Things are hotting up in the Nintendo camp as Americans look forward to the imminent release of the long-awaited N64 console. However, European gamers were disappointed to hear that the machine wouldn't be hitting their stores until 7 months later, missing the lucrative festive period. At the autumn 1996 European Computer Trade Show, Nintendo were conspicuous by their absence, obviously not wishing to promote the N64 so far away from its release date. But the software houses who are developing games for the new Super Console were there, like Acclaim, who gave the first showing of Turok Dinosaur Hunter.
The Nintendo 64 obviously gives you a lot more than other existing console platforms. And most of all, it seems to be like it graphically. It's just enormous, the 3D effects that you can be thrown into a 3D environment, which, when you look at the sort of existing competition, it no longer exists as competition, because it's the 3D that you get in Turok is a real world.
Turok was certainly pulling in the crowds, all eager to try a game that some were saying made Quake look like history. Such quality is clearly important to Nintendo, who are carefully selecting a so-called dream team of developers to deliver games of a high standard, and who are fiercely defending criticisms that their new platform will only have a few games to support its release, and expensive games at that.
We're not going to win the battle of having the most games. We'll concede that to our competitors. Given the price point for Nintendo 64, both hardware and cartridges, it is incumbent upon us to really focus in on the quality issue.
But all is not perfect in the land of Nintendo gaming. Mindscape were working on an N64 version of Top Gun, but claimed it had to drop the project due to lack of support from Nintendo and the ever-changing release dates. Others are not so easily put off. GT Interactive already has 8 titles for the N64 on its release schedule, including a version of Doom. Despite their optimism, the fact remains that by the time we see the N64 on European shop shelves, its 32-bit rivals will be on their 2nd or 3rd generation of games, with a huge range of quality products for PlayStation and Saturn owners to choose from. Mario 64 may be being hailed as the best video game ever, but will it be enough to prize gamers away from their PlayStations? There was once a time when the only way you could play Sega games was in the arcades or on one of their consoles at home. But recently they've been creating a stir in the PC world by releasing games for Windows 95. Things started slowly with the release of Echo the Dolphin, Comic Zone, Tomcat Alley and Baku Baku. These 16-bit conversions failed to make a huge impact on PC users. But then the arcade classic Virtua Fighter came onto the PC scene and people couldn't buy it fast enough. However, although Sega claim you don't need a very fast Pentium to run these games, when we played Virtua Fighter on a fast machine, it still wasn't up to Saturn speed. Despite this, and hoping to follow on from Virtua Fighter PC's success, Sega have enlisted the help of a little blue hedgehog. Sonic CD is next in line for conversion to Windows 95. This combination of Sega's game design and Microsoft's operating system may prove to be the perfect partnership when it comes to bringing arcade-style games like Sonic to the PC. Also in the running is Bug, which has been converted from the highly addictive Saturn game. And here's an exclusive peek at it.
And action.
It seems to be a faithful adaptation from the original with all the cute gameplay that made it so popular on the Saturn and should win him some new fans on this new format. Sega are hoping that Sonic will be comfortable in his new home, but is Sonic really what PC owners have been waiting for? As he's been around for so long and on so many Sega formats, it seems unlikely that he'll be seen as revolutionary. Looking to the future, Sega is planning to carry on releasing its classic games for Windows 95 with conversions of Daytona, the classic airborne fantasy game Panzer Dragoon, and Sega Rally. Let's hope that these games will be as playable as the originals and that Sega start releasing brand new games designed for the PC. Point-and-click adventuring has been with us for a while now, but the latest approach to the genre is showing what's possible just when you think you've seen it all before. Broken Sword lets you play the part of George Stobart, an American tourist in Paris, with nothing to do except work out why a clown would want to kill an old man and steal his ancient manuscript.
And did he say anything to you?
No, he was more interested in the waitress.
Looks aren't everything, but in these days of high-speed 3D polygons, this carefully staged and animated 2D mystery is going its own way.
There's a lot of 3D stuff at the moment. My personal feeling is that you can't generate images in real time fast enough to make them look really good. So we decided to go for the cartoon image instead, which obviously, everything being hand-drawn means that we can get the character across.
Hand-drawn characters mean having to attract plenty of animators from film and television. Strangely enough, the smaller scale of computer games actually offers artists something they don't have at a big studio.
We get more control for a start. There isn't as many people as in an animation studio. So you see the sort of flow right through from the original sketch right to the sort of coloured animation on the screen.
All this colourful presentation hides the fact that your character is about to discover that a very real order of 14th century warriors, called the Knights Templar, are alive and well and doing their best to control today's world through subterfuge and treachery.
In the end will be a beginning. An end to our enemies.
Blended together with the gameplay are hundreds of backgrounds and even more animation, this time full screen. Broken Sword had a whole team of programmers for its complex logic engine, but for every single animation frame, it only had one colorist.
I actually painted 20,000 drawings from start to finish, from scanning to outputting. An everyday person couldn't walk in off the street to paint them. It takes time to get your speed up to do the amount that I actually do.
It's a skilled job, but one which is, yes, you guessed it, done semi-automatically by a computer. Scan the drawings in, assign colours to each area, such as hair and clothing, and the software will try its best to fill in the remaining frames on its own. Whether it's the orchestral score by a respected film composer or the character's dialogue translated into several languages, attention to sound detail, as well as the visuals, has really succeeded in this adventure.
Have you resolved the Templar mystery?
No, not yet. I don't even know what it is I'm after.
This is one that'll certainly make you think without becoming frustrated. So if you've ever wanted a good example of how to combine an intriguing storyline with absorbing gameplay, then this is it. Once upon a time, young people would sit in their bedrooms thinking up games codes. Next thing they knew, they'd be on their way to their first million with a blockbuster video game. Yep, it really used to work like that. Take Rare, for example. This small outfit was happily programming games in this house. Then along came Donkey Kong Country, a 16-bit game for the SNES. Nintendo loved it and promptly bought out a quarter of the company. Now Rare only make games for the console giant. It seems that more and more of this raw talent has been swallowed up by big companies who are monopolising the games industry and providing most of the computer games that are out at the moment.
It's changed quite a lot. It basically used to be an industry where you could have small private associations of people that were able to put out quality product and get it on shelves. Now what you have is a plethora of people, most of whom wouldn't know quality software if they stepped on it.
Not all would agree, but there's no doubt that games are now so much more complex than they used to be and take so long to make that financial backing from a large company is often vital. An example of such a setup is Screamer 2, produced by Graffiti, but the backing comes from Virgin. The director of Earthworm Jim turned to another large company, Interplay, for similar reasons.
These days, there's plenty of people that are independent, and it's a choice that you make. Having a company like Interplay supporting you means that we can really we can break out in every country in the world very, very easily, and they give us advice based on what the markets would like, and we make sure that our games will sell.
Others, like Codemasters, have decided to continue going it alone. 10 years ago, Codemasters began with two brothers who did indeed program from their home. The result, games like Micro Machines.
The companies that have been bought up have run out of money, and we've always been profitable, so we haven't needed to sell out. And we like being independent because then we can choose our direction and make sure that we just do really high-quality games, which is what we enjoy.
Of course, when you join a big company, you'll lose that independence. Peter Molyneux has always been revered in the industry for his creativity. He programmed games like Theme Park for his own company, Bullfrog. Then he decided to sell his operation to publisher Electronic Arts.
At the very start, with 7 people, it's easy to make everyone creative, and if someone isn't creative, it's easy to spot that. But when you've got 100 people, it's much, much harder to do.
Rumours are now rife that Molyneux is planning to resign from Bullfrog. Has the price he's had to pay since joining Electronic Arts been too high?
To give you an example of Bullfrog, we used to, if we ever had a meeting, we had perhaps a meeting every 2 or 3 weeks. And with a corporate culture, there's meetings every 2 or 3 minutes.
It might all be too much for those who started out small, but today's high-flying games simply may not make the grade anymore without the financial and marketing support of the big boys of the industry. CD-ROMs are wonderful inventions. They're small, slim, cheap to make, and have turned the PC from a boring office machine into an increasingly good game system. Until you install one, though, it's hard to know quite what's on each shiny disc. So how do you decide which one to buy? What makes one piece of software stand out from another? Yes, that's right, you buy the game with the best-looking box. Who cares if it's any good? Just look at all that lovely packaging. When video games were mostly available in the form of cartridges, not CDs, the packaging they came in wasn't much bigger than the cart itself. Nintendo and Sega, who controlled distribution, sold almost every piece of software from Kirby the Clown to Killer Instinct in the same type of box. Then came the multimedia PC, and within a very short space of time, there were hundreds of companies under no one's control, trying to sell CD-ROMs in any way they could.
You need to really sell products, obviously, and there are so many games on the market that you need to make yours the most predominant and the most striking. Get as much on them so the player can see exactly what the games are about.
Whether you believe industry hype or not, 32-bit games don't follow the big box rule. PlayStation software cases are only marginally bigger than those for music CDs, and the Saturns, while twice the height, have just enough space to hold the manual and one disc. If only they were bigger, then they could hold all those useless posters, demo CDs, cute toys and company brochures that add nothing to the gameplay. Shiny Entertainment, a company known for its inventiveness and its console games, has switched to the PC for MDK. But instead of giving in to the marketing people completely, MDK gets this simple cube-shaped box minus the hundreds of bits of paper that fall on the floor when you take the CD out. It's still big, though, and if a team as successful as Shiny can't beat the system, then what chance do other software houses with less successful games have of convincing distributors to go small?
It'll never change, because people associate bigness with goodness. And I know people in the past have actually put in extra stuff, not that they wanted to, but because they thought the weight was what people would want to buy. So they just put anything they can think of to make it feel heavier.
Oh dear, and after all this time I thought I knew why games were successful. So just how big and bulky should a PC box be? We play a lot of games on this programme, and we're always trying to find out what's new and what's different about the latest piece of electronic wizardry. However, the problem is that virtually every game that appears belongs to a certain idea or playing style invented way back when the interactive business began, no matter what format it's on. The basics are racers, sports sims, flight sims, arcade, combat, platformers, adventure, strategy, puzzles, and the latest addition, the interactive movie. Think of anything you've ever played, and it's either one of these types or a combination of them. When the industry was new, anything seemed possible. Now that games are a multi-billion-dollar business, experimentation isn't so easy.
We always used to just make games that we thought would be great games. Now there's a finance person somewhere at the top of a tree who signs the checkbook. You know, he's like looking around and go, oh, fighting games did well last year, we must produce a fighting game, as if they're going to continue on doing brilliantly, and they don't always.
The result is one title after another, with sometimes little to differentiate between them. It's even quite common to find a recycled game that's worse than the ones that preceded it. It's hard, though, to blame publishers for wanting to repeat their successes. Dark Forces was a very polished reworking of the much-imitated Doom. Jedi Knight is Dark Forces 2, a sequel to a game that wasn't original in the first place, but at least LucasArts are giving fans what they want.
The credits to our sequel is that although it's a game that's a first-person action game, it's the storyline itself that is also compelling. It isn't simple random levels of shooting, but there's a very strong storyline that extends the Star Wars universe into a whole new dimension.
One thing that does change in this industry is the technology. Faster chips, better sound, more memory. Whatever gets improved gives programmers a chance, at least in theory, to bend the current rules, if not break them. The Nintendo 64 is the biggest leap in home gaming technology for some time. Wary that a flood of unoriginal software would be written for the console, Nintendo have allowed only those skilled enough and rich enough to write for the machine. The first titles released have been highly praised, but once again the genres remain the same, only the realism has changed.
I mean, definitely the industry is responding to the technology, but the technology does not drive an industry. When you lose the passion in making games, then you lose the players who want to play them.
Making games is no longer about fun, it's about making money. New ideas mean taking risks, and why should they risk what they've got when we're happy to take what they're giving us? When we go to find out what we want to buy for our computer or console, it's in a shop, where all we can do is check out the packaging and the pretty pictures. Before it all gets to the shops, though, it gets shown with far more care and attention at interactive entertainment trade shows around the world, where the public isn't invited in. The biggest and most important show used to be the Consumer Electronics Show, held twice a year in the USA. The event covered almost every kind of electronic device, and interactivity, which started out as a small part of the show, grew to dominate it in the 90s. It wasn't long before someone suggested an alternative. And so in 1995, E3 was born. Held in Los Angeles, this was the moment when Hollywood really did say hello to Silicon Valley, and the business was seen to have grown up. E3 is now the focus for developers, publishers and distributors from all over the world, as well as anyone hoping to get into the industry. E3 is a chance for companies to show off their upcoming software and hardware, see what their competitors are doing, and try to strike as many deals as possible in one meeting after another. ECTS is Europe's smaller version of E3. It used to be held twice a year, but now that publishers want to hold back their best products to unveil in Los Angeles, it's switched to an autumn-only arrangement. As a result, ECTS in late 1996 was the biggest it had ever been, with almost as many millions being spent on displays as at E3. A lot of that funding comes from Japan, and of its own corporate exhibitions, the most established is Nintendo's Shishinkai show in Tokyo. On display are titles that may take a year or more to reach the rest of the world, if at all. A lot of these games are specifically designed for the Japanese market, so there's little demand for them elsewhere. With games, multimedia and all things interactive expanding so rapidly, trade shows have helped to keep everyone in touch. You do have to wonder, though, whether they're going in the right direction. After all, the money spent to impress visitors at these events might be better spent on making more imaginative software. Having said that, most industries do have their own trade events, so why should we be any different? Although the big shows run for 3 or 4 days, people often don't have time to see everything they want to, and keeping ahead of the game can really wipe you out. Behind every game is a huge team of people and years of preparation. But what do all these games have in common? Well, they were produced by one software company, Gremlin Interactive. We went behind the scenes at their headquarters to find out exactly what goes into making a new game and where the initial ideas come from.
The design for a game can come from one of many things, a character or a 3D engine. It really depends on the style of game. We like to start, a good story is a good starting point for a game.
So let's take Realms of the Haunting as an example. Following the brainstorming, the graphic designer gets to work producing a storyboard, like this one for the opening sequence. It's just like producing a movie, as every part of the game has a visual script. Meanwhile, the programmers are hard at work writing the game code and working on the engine, which provides the structure and movement within the game. The look of the game is crucial, and there's a whole team of people who design the graphics. They work either from drawings or from written descriptions of the characters and surroundings to create the final animated results. Everything from the backgrounds to smaller incidental objects need to be created, and it means a long, laborious process of modeling, coloring and animating before they're ready to be part of the game. To give a more realistic feel to their games, Gremlin have an in-house motion capture studio, whereby using infrared cameras they can digitize any movement. This is particularly useful in their Actua Sports series, as it gives lifelike movement to the players. Once the graphics are completed, they're incorporated into the game engine, and the programming continues. At the top of Gremlin's offices, one of the last important elements is added to the game, the sound effects. Games with speech are also redubbed into a variety of languages. Once this is done, all that remains is to record the music, which is written and played in-house and then added to the graphics and sound effects. And so the program is finally finished, but it's not quite ready to hit the shelves. The game is now given to the testers, who'll play it all the way through looking for bugs and glitches, or simply anything they don't like. These problems are then reported to the programmers, who'll try and fix them. For us players, this is possibly the most important part of game production, as no one wants to buy a faulty game. Cyberspace and the World Wide Web is often perceived to be an all-singing, all-dancing virtual world, but the majority of pages still look like your average multimedia product. Until now, that is. Recently launched is the Virtual World Wide Web, which promises to deliver fast, real-time, three-dimensional applications over the internet. Based around a simulated city, the virtual web links together 40 worlds offering a variety of different 3D experiences. The designers of this space estimate that the virtual web will grow to 200 worlds within 6 months and 2,000 within a year. Currently, there are various worlds, including flying a rescue helicopter to visiting a holiday resort in pixelated Palm Springs. All these different environments use Superscape VR, as used in the virtual safari package you saw earlier in the show. To run them over the internet, you need to download a plug-in for either Netscape or Explorer. Once you've done this, the loading time for each of the areas is surprisingly quick. In the amusement arcade, there are several games to play, like this one, featuring a strange jumping sausage. There are also some arcade classics like that brick-busting favourite Breakout and a version of Virtual Pool. Also in the city, you'll find an art gallery where budding 3D artists can display their latest creations, from abstract shapes to virtual timepieces. The virtual web may not be huge at the moment, but it is growing quickly, and it already includes a shopping mall, an exhibition space, a training centre and a university. Superscape VR loads faster than Vermal and is easy to use. We reckon the virtual World Wide Web is worth keeping an eye on, as it could well be the shape of things to come. If you owned a computer or console many years ago, the type of games available were very different and not very varied. PCs were for people who liked thoughtful, strategy-based games, while console owners were after fast, simple thrills. But it's now becoming more and more difficult to tell a PC game from a console game. People often have more than one gaming system, and it's no longer surprising when a single game is released on them all. There are still some underlying factors to consider though, and when it comes to writing games for more than one format, no one knows the problems better than the developers.
Working inside a console, you usually have a cartridge, and the cartridge is really small, and you're limited by the space that cartridge gives you. So it's like you're programming with your hands behind your back the whole time. Getting a PC, you have hard drives, you have sound cards, you've got a really nice monitor sitting there. It's basically a dream come true for programming.
Yes, when faced with trying to fit a PC game into a console with 4 to 8 times less memory, the problems can be horrendous. However, technical wizardry isn't the whole picture, and there are several reasons why making a perfect conversion is not always a good idea.
With Lands of Lore and with our new product Blade Runner, we're doing PSX versions of the titles. And In doing that, we re-engineer the title, not because of the machine's capabilities, but because of the audience's expectations.
It doesn't matter how good a title is. If you're after a few minutes of fun and it takes you an hour to plough through the manual, you won't be pleased. Most mass-market businesses succeed because they give the customer what he or she wants. Just as staring at a TV screen can't compete with staring at a high-quality monitor, so a few joypad buttons can't compete with a full PC keyboard. Sega is just one of the big players who sees the computer and console market as quite separate, but that hasn't stopped them from starting to transfer their top Saturn games to PC. Entertainment software will be the most power-hungry application the majority of PC owners will ever run, so if they keep on upgrading their equipment, it's probably for that reason alone. Until now, PC games have lagged far behind the fluid 3D visuals of the Saturn and the PlayStation, but there's likely to come a time soon when the look of PC games may even beat the consoles.
The thing is that the PC is evolving all the time. Every year you double the power of the PC. PlayStation hasn't changed. It's one of the reasons why they're cheap, that they haven't got all that power.
One console with considerable power is the Nintendo 64. Because it creates graphics in such a different way from any other existing home system, developers will have to learn new programming techniques to get the most from it. The result is that these games won't be available on any other hardware. So just as it seems the different formats are growing closer together, they could be about to shoot off in completely new directions. But so long as we end up with more choices, everyone should be a winner. Something's missing. That's more like it, and I'm not talking about the game itself here, as there's nothing wrong with a good retro blast of Defender. No, this time I'm checking out the music. Wipeout 2097 is an excellent game, but when it was released, it was also heralded for its built-in library of dance tracks to complement the gameplay. These tracks also stood alone and were sold as a separate album. They were much more than just background music for a computer game. The choice of music included tracks from bands like the Chemical Brothers and a couple of tunes exclusive to the album. Wipeout 2097 has the most high-profile soundtrack of any game yet, but many other software companies are realizing the importance of music in their games. The Dig took its inspiration not from techno, but from the classical composer Wagner.
What the music will do when it's really working in a game is it will respond well to the player's actions, so that it's as if there's a custom score for each performance of the game that a player plays, and that really draws the player in. It makes them feel like they're part of that universe.
One game of which this is certainly true is Broken Sword, which has 3 hours of specially composed music by the talented conductor Barrington Phelan. It's not just a basic score, the music changes as you go around different parts of the game to match the mood of the moment. More often than not, games music is less classical and more hardcore. It began with those catchy little tunes we hummed from games like Mario and Tetris. A couple, like this one, were good enough to be funked up and made into pop singles. But now games are infiltrating the club scene, and it's Sega's turn to pump up the volume. They've collaborated with the record company Suburban Bass, who've taken sound effects from games and revamped them into tracks. This is the melodic tune from the original game of Knights, but throw on your new Club Sega CD and you can bop along to the Knights drum and bass mix. Alternatively, funk it up with Baku Baku. Or get down to a house mix for Sonic 3D. The Club Saturn album reinforces the generally held belief that companies like Sega are seeking credibility with an older audience of game players and music lovers alike, and it won't stop here. As music in games is now perceived as cool, more and more software companies are opting for specially composed music. It's just one more sign that computer gaming itself is growing up, and joining forces with the music biz, possibly the biggest entertainment industry in the world, can only be good news.